and
It'll be
other
fun, yeah.
complications.
Yeah.
The dance floor's ready.
Oh, yeah.
The surgery. Really?
Yeah,
It's been so
Karen's
long.
gonna pass these down. Yeah, I have a,
The Jackson.
Go live.
okay. Yeah. It doesn't work. It's great. You better finish chewing.
Yeah. Good. All right, it's 12 o'clock. I will call the meeting to order. Starting with the roll call, please.
Yes, Patrick Wyatt here. Karen Stroud,
Here.
Dan Mulder,
Here.
Jamie Melky, and Teresa Johnson.
Here.
And so Jamie Melky is, Jackson. Bill's here, thank you, Jackson. Jamie is the council rep, so replacing Nancy, who decided to go to the planning commission. So, and this actually works for Jamie's schedule too, so. She's the daytime. She works, just not the daytime.
We're not
So-
taking any offense from Nancy going to planning commission over tree board.
No.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's the vote.
Glad to have you on board. First is approval of our minutes from the last meeting. Does anybody have any corrections or changes they would recommend?
Looks good to me, and I would make a motion to accept.
All right,
A second.
all those in favor?
I,
Aye. Great. Okay, board communications. Do we have any?
I'll just say that we did receive a $500 donation for a tree. So that's good. So we're working on that. We also have 2 vegetation management requests that have been approved on the bluff that are being worked on or have been worked on public property. And then we have 2 more for 2023. Ben, Lucas and I are gonna go over those. So trimming on the bluff is going on. I talked to Ben that this may be the year that we might want to start looking at our, for 2023, when we get to our goals, we can talk about that, but whether or not the city wants to create our own tree care or maintenance plan on the bluff so that we can get away from private requests. And then now that we have a little bit more money to do so, we can, might be something worth looking into, because if we have our own plan on the bluff, we could say, this is the city's plan, this is what we're doing when we're doing it. Too bad for those above or below the bluff, this is our plan, so based on professional opinion, but we can talk about that later.
I do like that idea.
What's it like an example of one of the requests you got?
Well, they're usually for the view, right? So on, we have that a corner parcel, actually, Dan, your map is here, so it's actually easy to see on this map. Thanks, Dana. This is for another topic, but
Yeah.
Right here, where State Street goes up, from Main Street, so you go up to State Street on M119. This corner parcel right here is city property. So those property owners right there wanted to, trim up the trees and have a better view. Historically, when we have trimming on the bluff, usually the problem is that these people will make a request up here and then people below it will oppose that request. And then there's like a stalemate and it's a whole big drawn out thing.
Yeah.
So, and the process works fairly well, like on this side of town, on the east side, the shade drain. All these neighbors come together for the most part and put a request in together, and they talk to all the neighbors to make sure that, they don't have any problems beforehand. And then the request goes to council, to city staff, and it goes pretty smoothly.
Victor, are any of these involving taking big trees out, or is it just like cleaning up brush
It's
and?
mostly scrub.
Okay.
A lot of people come with a request to, as you probably know, to top the trees and that's where Ben is like, nope. They got a branch here, a branch there, but we're not.
Yeah.
But most of it's scrub. There's a lot of brush, lilacs, juniper, stuff like that. That's just, growing. A lot of box elder, stuff like that, but there's not a lot of trees. I think people are getting the message that we're not going to just take trees out. We're more likely to approve trimming and clearing of scrub than actually taking trees out. So it's gotten better the past couple of years, I think, but anyway.
Again, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say they're always gonna ask.
Yeah,
Yeah, I will ask. I was gonna say to keep it in the back of our minds for discussion later at a future date. At West Bluff, I think it would be so simple to just whatever our right of way is, get that scrub stuff cleaned off. I think it would open up views far greater.
we do have a
than-
request for West Bluff right now, so.
Yeah,
it
I mean,
includes
like
parts of
you
that.
said, though, if we could put it in the budget and proactively just open those views up, I think we would be heroes. in the
And we
city.
just we communicated with the state and because they have a process for getting permission,
Oh, right, it's
and-
they're right. away.
they're right away, but they don't have a problem with the city doing it.
When you're referring to West Bluff, are you talking about just that spot by state or?
State Street.
So yeah, so there's two West, like we got this entire parcel, all this right here is West Bluff. This part of West Bluff right here, the city determined that we don't own that. So that's not the part of West Bluff we're talking about. We're talking about now, right here, essentially. That's what we own.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the city owns that part there plus that little spot over by State Street?
Yeah, we own this right here by State Street, this corner. We also own wherever Spring Street is coming down right here. Right here, I believe, or so. Oh, is it right here? Spring Street is right here, so.
By the
By the
boardwalk.
boardwalk, yeah, we own that all the way down as well as the right of way, so.
I was just thinking.
And the shade drain that's on this side, right here.
I was just thinking even in addition to what we own, like, for private people or below. If the right of way goes like 10 feet beyond the guardrail there, I think it'd be really nice if we could get permission to trim that up from the state, I guess.
Yeah,
that's
no,
right, yeah.
so that's something that we're
Just
gonna
to open it.
plan that's what we want to work on is back in the budget for that. So that's. Organization.
Well, I think, looking ahead in the agenda, tree canopy articles, it would be interesting to take a map like this and lay out,
Talk about that.
what the city owns. So it's really clear to people who, don't understand that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, especially since that one block on State or on Bluff is not city owned, so it's kind of confusing.
It is. I've often wondered who
Yeah.
owns what.
Yeah.
Well, and it's
right,
changed recently too, on
Yeah.
who owns
Okay.
what,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or
Right.
not so much changed as was uncovered, who the
Uncovered,
real
yes.
owners are.
Oh, yeah.
If it's okay with the chair, do we want to start with this? Because this kind of impacts the other item, which was the M119 tree planting
Well,
recommendation.
let's,
Well, I think I'd like to first see we have
Public comment?
public comments in a second.
Oh,
And
no,
you're
I'm here as an observer.
An observer, okay, all right, well, welcome. All right, didn't want to miss you if you had a comment or a question to ask. All right. Yeah, we can, so you're thinking about just jumping to new business or do you want to go
Jumping
to
to
number?
the tree planting locations.
so number 2 instead of number 1 for old business. So you
Yeah,
gotta
so I
start.
think
Okay, yeah.
number
Okay.
one's gonna follow on number 2.
Right, that's
Yep,
right.
so if you want to put the map up again there, Victor.
Anna, thank you for all the work. on
Yeah,
all of
well, this kind of ballooned once I got started working on it.
But this is.
I know, come up here, right?
We do have a.
We can turn off the lights.
Yeah. Can you name the streets too? Do you mind naming the streets?
Okay.
Anna, would you mind naming the streets that we're looking at?
Yes, okay. So we have here, this is coming in from the east. This is 119 coming down into Main Street, right?
Mhm.
Here's Hoyt to the
Okay.
north.
Gotcha.
There's Lake Street as it curves around. This is State as it comes up, goes up here, jogs over and goes up. And so this is one thing we're gonna talk about is primary, secondary corridors. Then, so those were my recommendations and what we might consider to be primary corridors. This is all up for discussion.
So this is the legend right here,
Yeah,
right? Red is,
major.
yellow is secondary.
Yep.
Dashed green is residential.
So this is all super subjective and this is just kind of a draft first shot at it. And next time I do it, I will lighten up the background because it's kind of hard to read my notes. But yeah, for secondary, there's streets that I think get a lot of traffic and deserve our attention. So we've got Bay Street, Beach Street, Traverse, 119, and I guess we could consider that major. I'll explain why I didn't, but maybe we should anyways. Ann Street, we've talked about before. Spring Street, simply because the school's there and it does get quite a bit of traffic. And Arbor Street as it connects into downtown. So that's kind of one type of planning unit that we could consider going after our corridors. Then the other would be either neighborhoods or, districts or whatever. So the CBD is bigger than this, but just for trees, it's kind of right here. What is it, Victor? Does it go over another block this way and up this way and down to here, something like that? Yeah, maybe I might fix that the next time I do this. That's a district. I didn't note commercial districts, but we could do that too. There aren't that many streets through them, or we might be thinking about street trees. So the residential neighborhoods, Layton Park up here. I don't know if this one has a name, Victor, but it's like the trailer park and what else is back in Windermere? Right? So I just called it North Lake. And they all kind of have their own characteristics. I called State Road West, Uptown West. State Road East, Uptown East. I feel like the whole West Bluff, East Bluff is almost kind of its own planning unit because it has different issues like views. And down below the bluff west, then we've got the Conservancy here. And then Glen Drive, I think of as kind of its own planning unit, heavily treated. Then below the bluff east is like Main Street, what there is on Bay Street and Weekwood Townsend. Yep, okay. And then kind of the waterfront is another whole district in and of itself. So this might then bring us to the street tree planning process. I just put this together this morning. My thought behind this is how are we going to fund a program like this, a street tree program? And I think a really good way to do it would be through grants. So this could be kind of the beginning of a report and a proposal for street trees that has some really good tick points that somebody that's doing the grants would give us the grants would like. So I think if we can somehow at some point when we get further down the road, turn this into a report, and then Victor can write grants, maybe to get this underway a little faster than we might otherwise be able to do it just through donations. So I think in this, the first thing we want to talk about is what our vision is for a street tree program. And this is all up for discussion. If anybody has anything they want to add, let's do it now. And we also can percolate on this for a month or two also, but to create an attractive streetscape and a healthy urban force in the city through the implementation of a well thought out street tree plan. It's very simple. I don't know if it has to be more involved in that. And so what would be the purpose? To have goals and a plan in place for the future planting of street trees in Harbor Springs. And so for goals, I think there's kind of maybe two categories of things. And if anybody has any more ideas, let's add them in right now. So why do we want street trees in Harbor Springs? Number one is just to create an attractive, orderly streetscape in the city. 2 is to define primary and secondary corridors. 3, to separate vehicle and pedestrian traffic. To support the benefits of the city's urban canopy. To provide shade on sidewalks and in the neighborhoods, and to calm traffic. Any other thoughts?
Vehicles, would you include bicycles in that? So many urban areas are creating specific bike lanes with the increase in riders. I wonder if we. should
Yeah, and so
consider
it's
that
kind of
too.
a question, should they be on the sidewalk or should they be on the road? Because you sure do see both.
They need to be on the road primarily, sidewalks, supposed to be for
Depends on
pedestrians.
the.
What about the
speed.
80-year-old?
Right.
Depends on the speed.
Speed and age.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any other thoughts? For now? Okay, then kind of a second set of goals in my mind would be. First is why do we want to have street trees? The second is why do we need to have guidelines? I think number 1 is to ensure that the tree locations don't interfere with the city infrastructure, and that would be like overhead wires, underground electric lines, gas lines, sidewalks, that type of thing. And to ensure that the planting of new trees supports the principles of good design. We're not just slapping them in wherever. And that'd be things like, are the trees the right scale? Are they spaced right to create a sense of repetition, that kind of thing. Then to ensure that trees that are planted will have the best opportunity for good health. And that would be through choosing the right tree for the right place. Factors, that's on our right tree, right place include things like hardiness, mature size, moisture needs, sensitivity to road salt, susceptibility to deer browsing, how invasive are the roots.
I suggest just one more guideline perhaps, and that's one focus we had is like an equity about like different neighborhoods. having
Yeah.
Different trees, so that we're
That
not
would
all
be great.
planting all our trees just in
Yeah.
one area.
And just jumping ahead, on page 2, I found a really good reference for how to create a street tree plan. And I kind of had my idea that this really is a good format. So it's put out by University of Minnesota. So if you get a chance to look at it, have you seen it, Victor?
No, you just sent this.
Um. Any other thoughts on guidelines with this? Okay, so for our discussions today. Do the planning units that I've identified make sense as a way to, like, we would agree on planning units and then we might say these 3 we want to tackle first or something. That was sort of how I was thinking it through in my mind. So I think we could approach it from the corridor standpoint, like let's really get Main Street looking the way we want it to. Or State Street. I have a whole big discussion about what to do about this section of State. And then also like maybe there's some neighborhoods that are more important than some corridors. So I don't think it's bad to have corridors and like neighborhoods, both being planning units, because they're kind of a different animal, like what you might do in a neighborhood as opposed to. Yeah, corridor. So this map, it's so hard to see, but there's actually sidewalks on here. So that's really helpful. We have property lines on here, buildings, of course. At this scale, it's really hard to see, but when you blow it up. it
Can you
helps.
talk about why you decided not to include 119 as a major corridor, that west part?
Yeah, so. Well, I think it's gonna be about, but I think we should include it actually as a major corridor. It's just, is it gonna be exempt from trees? Like, in my mind, I think it'd be great to plant some trees along there. What's gonna happen to the property owners though, that are in the houses along there? Are they gonna like have a heart attack? But maybe, so that gets into policy comes later, like. Maybe we really need to think about the policy on that. What takes priority, views or trees, or what is a happy compromise kind of thing?
Would it be impacted by what the DOT is gonna do to stabilize that bluff too?
Yeah,
There, it could be, I mean, most of their work is going to be on the south side.
Yeah.
Which I don't, we could eventually have a plan, but I think we also have the sidewalks on the north side of that M119. The question there is whether or not you want to plant trees in the green area on that north side.
Yeah, it kind of seems sort of contrary to what, we've told them, before, they want to cut all the trees, below them across on the south side. And now we're talking about maybe giving them trees on the north side. I don't know, I think you're right.
Well,
about-
I see that point. I mean, I don't view it as us giving them trees. It's our property, it's our right of way. And I see where Dan is saying that, that might not make them happy, but while that's one consideration, I think we should approach this what's best for the city and the public, and not just the homeowner. So if we think that, clearly people driving on M1, if you're worried about views of the general public, people driving on M119, when they look out, they're coming that way, they're gonna look out over the bluff. They're not looking at the home. So a tree on the north side is not gonna be as impactful.
I don't have this noted on here either, so I'm not sure if and where we have electric lines. I do have it on my notes at home. So
That's something to consider.
off the top of your head, yeah, if they're on the north side, that might impact things, no shade trees, it would be more like smaller ornamental trees.
My question was, for some reason, I don't know, Jackson, when you go to school, but the bluff, I guess East Bluff, up to Judd Hill, I feel like that, I don't know if that's a secondary corridor, but a lot of people drive on that bluff.
Yeah, I would say the bluffs, pretty popular.
Yeah.
It's
So this is
possibly
kind of they're also the planning units, so East Bluff, West Bluff, is that what you mean, or?
Well, I'm talking about the corridor, you have the streets of the corridors, and then the bluff drive.
Oh, so that should be like yellow.
Yeah, maybe, I think, because a lot of people use
Okay.
that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you judging?
Yeah, no, well, I'll be in the minutes.
Yeah, okay, good. I agree with both those things. So let's go ahead and say, really, this is a major corridor. We don't know what we're gonna decide to do with it yet.
And we can split the major corridor up into
Sections, yeah. And then let's also say that East Bluff is a secondary corridor.
Any other thoughts on corridors?
Yeah, I'm thinking about boardwalk, when we finally get all the funding, what impact that would have on a plan that we might put together.
Well, that's actually, I was just talking to Lucas about that, and this is why I was also mentioned potentially getting a plan for the bluff as well, because when we remove that boardwalk, one of the things we're gonna wanna do is clear up some of that scrub and that brush there. And that's an opportunity to also look at, is there an opportunity to replant something if necessary, on the boardwalk? So that will come with that. So that's important that you brought that up. We also have to remember that much of the boardwalk is not within on our property. We just have a by right east highway by user easement on that. So it's really only that Spring Street, that corridor that goes down is where we really have control to plant trees. The rest of the boardwalk, we just have the control to replace as is in the same exact spot. So
Interesting. It
Can
kind
we
of brings
check
back.
that though with Jim Raymer?
Yeah, we have.
Because
yeah.
I'm just thinking about like Merchants Walkway, that's an easement, but don't we have the right to make improvements? So
What
wouldn't
we have,
trees
what we have,
be
with
an
what we
improvement?
have on with the merchants walkway is completely different than we have
Okay,
with the boardwalk. The boardwalk that we have, aside from the Spring Street right away, is basically an implied easement that boardwalk has been there and controlled by the city for several decades. So we're allowed to maintain that boardwalk as is. So, yeah.
It'd be another good thing to put on the map. We might want to put in a tree canopy article, so
Mhm.
people understand that as well. Because they would know that otherwise.
Yeah.
But I don't.
People don't.
I was thinking, one idea for the next, as we're starting to work on this for the next tree canopy article, is why have a tree plan?
Mhm.
Just so people can start to get used to the idea that that's something we're working on.
I think we touched on that in prior articles too, a little bit.
Okay, so planning units, we've talked about corridors. Any other thoughts on corridors? Do you guys think Hoyt should be considered kind of a main corridor? Because that's where a lot of township people come in, right?
Yeah, that's used a lot.
Okay, so we're gonna add.
Yep.
119, we're gonna add East Bluff. Any other secondary corridors that we want to consider. So kind of, I mean, you don't want to highlight every single route in the city, but we get a fair amount of traffic on some as an east-west route, but maybe that's more of a neighborhood route,
I would think that's
Yeah.
more, I mean, it's intended purpose is
not to get people from A to B.
but I can see how it, especially when you have that, when we've had that traffic diversion on M119, a lot of people are taking summer.
Mhm.
Um,
And so do we want to leave Spring Street as a secondary route?
It is, I mean, well, Jackson, you probably, school.
I would keep it as a secondary route, but I would add that bluff side.
Mhm.
As a secondary.
What about Second Street?
Oh,
That's where everyone's going and coming from Glen Drive.
right here.
Yeah. Like maybe as a secondary.
You got the back.
Like just where we have it just here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
Might get busier, there's some newer homes recently put there, I think.
Yeah, and then of course, if the Ogawa development
Yeah.
goes in there. Yeah.
Bacon and trees.
Just so I know what we're talking about, where does West Bluff begin and
Okay.
where does East Bluff?
So
And
So right here is-
there.
M119, right, Main Street, and then you go up to State Street.
Yeah,
So we generally consider the State Street line right here as dividing between west. and
that's the
west.
dividing line.
That's what we,
State,
for addresses at least, and then this is East Bluff.
okay, State Street is that.
Yeah, State Street is that dividing line, but when people look at it, I mean, because of this, it's really, but yeah, this is really the dividing line.
Thank you.
Yep. So that
And
keeps
just
right-
one thing to keep in the back of our minds too is, we can say some of these planning units are exempt from planting trees, like right now, State Road here has wires on both sides, and then the median where you would plant a tree is about this way. So that may be exempt, or we may have a bigger plan down the road where we would move sidewalks, have street trees, because that's one of our major corridors, but to me, it is the most unsightly corridor we have.
Yeah, and it's, but like, as you said,
Yeah.
it's so narrow for tree planting.
Yeah.
And then it's also to consider, I guess this is when maybe we can move on to priorities. there,
Yeah.
But like you had mentioned earlier, the Glen Drive area, that is heavily wooded, you know, that section, you know, does that need to be a focus, a priority? I would say no, because there's already so many natural trees there, but.
So, and that was a note I had, this is well treated, so maybe we don't need to worry about this.
Well, plus some of it's in West Travis too, right?
No, well, yeah,
I
but
think it goes to here,
we annexed, not annexed, but we have a.
providing services.
Actually, up to here is what it goes to, so, yeah. Yeah, so this part west was probably in the 70s or 80s. 425 agreement, they're part of the city for a while, at least.
Okay, priorities, we've got the corridors that could be a priority, and then we have the neighborhoods and then the districts that are priorities.
So if we want to go through a little quick brief history of what we've done, right, so we made this at one point a priority, or at least we focused on Layton Park, we did some tree plantings there.
Mhm.
What we've talked a lot about our parks, and we've talked a lot about State Street and, Main Street, and we know that a lot of that is dependent on the DDA's project and when they get to that project down there. So, and the more recent one that we're talking about now is the entrance to town, M119. So based on this project happening, probably hopefully in the spring, I think that would be our
Number one priority, yeah.
yeah. A lot of our other tree plantings have taken part in parks, you know, so, but yeah, I would say this is our first priority, given that it's a project.
There actually are quite a few trees up in that North Lake. I don't know if anybody's ever driven in there or through there. But that to me would be maybe a little lower down the list. Lake Street drives me kind of crazy, honestly. So for the most part, the wires are on the south side. And there are many examples of badly mutilated trees where they've been chopped in previous years. So this, I have this listed under policy, is at some point, do we want to say, let's get those out of there, let's get the right size tree in there? Or do we just let them keep limping along? Then there are also spaces where there are no trees. So Lake Street to me would be a good one. Ann Street doesn't have very many trees, but it's a secondary corridor. So I think that could be in, at least in the, top 10 or something. And then surprisingly, Spring Street, not many trees up in this area. So that could be a good one. And the same thing with Arbor Street, there's big sections where there's no trees. Would we want to make, I don't know, I think Bay Street kind of is in the same category as, the Bluffs, the Bluff Street. In that, do we want to get into trying to plant trees along there, and then come up against lawsuits from people that live along there?
I don't think we should. I mean, we're cognizant that people will file lawsuits, but really they'll be unsuccessful because that's our property. I mean, that's, I think we should focus first on where our serious gaps are at and are going to be. And I think you've nailed it with Lake Street as well. And this entrance, I do agree with Ann Street. But maybe that Ann Street is also incorporated as well as part of the neighborhood, like an examination of the neighborhood. I do think we need Bay Street and Bluff plans, but I think it's gonna be need more careful and more detailed planning because of the Bluff, for
The
example.
sensitivity of it.
Well, sensitivity and because there's a lot more usage, like conflicts of uses down there as opposed to right here, you're just driving into town. But right here, you got pedestrians, you got businesses, you got bicyclists, you got people who live there, people who work there. So I think, in my opinion, that's a little more. Because you have a lot more, and you have a lot more utilities congregated there, whereas here, we just got the wires there, and that's really.
Do we want to separate it into like 3 phases, like stuff we'd like to work on this year? And then phase 2 and 3 are down the road.
I think it would be really hard to, that's my opinion, to just make a priority plan for all these when we're tackling them. I think we should just pick a few that we think we can tackle coming up.
Okay,
I think it'd be good to finalize what we said as priorities overall, not
Yeah.
necessarily just for 23, but where we want to go. And some of it are impacted by parks, with so many parks on Bay. We need to recognize that as important as well, and how that's going to fit together. And the other question I had when I looked at this earlier is the Main Street streetscape plan that we've talked about quite a bit. Does that become a bigger priority now, or does it stay, kind of out there somewhere? We know that's going to be really expensive.
No, that's a good point. And I think, I mean, since we just saw this, most of us just saw this today, I think it'd be probably better to like give us homework. And some of these questions like goals for each unit, I think we need to spend more time thinking about that. So maybe we can come at the next meeting with.
and some of this is down the road
Yeah.
stuff, like how are we gonna fund it?
Yeah,
Donations,
that's.
And,
But I think the most important part, number two is the most important for us as a treatment policy wise, as priority goal for the units.
Yeah. Just to briefly touch on, it, we can move on. This article talks a lot about community input, that at some point we might want to have a town hall meeting or something like that. And then publicity on it, and then they suggested like having like a form letter, and you might have done this already, I think, but like where you send it out to people that are gonna be getting trees.
Yeah.
And saying, we're gonna put a tree here, maybe give them 3 choices. And rather than yes or no, I want a tree. And then would you be, and have a check mark, would you be willing to fill the gator bag once a week? So down the road though, So next steps, we've got the base map. I'm having, just some delays in getting the infrastructure stuff. So I need to get in touch with Dan Healy. Lucas got back to me, but Dan hasn't. I need to get in touch with the gas line, the gas company. We'll talk about that later. So planning units, our zoning supports all this, because that was one thing that was in the article, like we aren't gonna ever run into problems where like somebody that doesn't want a tree can look at the zoning and interpret it a certain
So
way.
there's no zoning that prevents tree planting on public property.
Okay. Done. Let's see, the letter to send to residents potentially down the road. And then a bunch of policy stuff.
Some of these, yeah, we'll have to look at this as more a staff
Yeah,
before we
yeah.
get back, so we can get stuff like guidelines for placement of trees or underground wires.
Yeah.
Max height and stuff like that.
Trees versus views. Yeah, we talked about some of this stuff already. So maybe for our next meeting, if people could look at those policies. See what you think about them. And then like Victor said, staff is gonna have them and work on most of them.
And then, yeah, I think policies and the prioritization, the goals for each of these ones would be just helpful. I think Dana did a great job. Well, on this is awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Took a lot of time. Thank you, Dana. That's
Then,
really,
then
really
it-
helpful.
my view of how this might happen, if let's say we want to do Union Street, then we actually go there and see how many trees.
Yeah.
That's not something we do during
No.
this part of the day.
I do have there's one point, and that is, and we often put together plans and somehow there's new priorities set or whatever as a result of other decisions that are made outside of the tree board, for example, the substation. You know, substation's gonna be going in over here. What does that mean in terms of trees? I mean, those kinds of things are gonna come up. So I think we just need to have some flexibility in how we like manage that. And try not to get too diverted from what we just have designer goals are. We just recognize some of those things that might be coming up.
Yeah.
You know, like Babe Bluff thing that came up, or the other substation, or the, you know, the little tunnel, the culvert, you know, what all that means, you know, now all of a sudden we're diverted from what we tried to set as priorities from our plan to these things that come up. So that's.
Yeah, it's the nature of, it's the nature of this.
Right,
yeah.
right.
And I'm sure next year other things will come up too, so.
But those are things we know are gonna come up.
So how about if, do you want to send this stuff out? to-
Yeah, you mail it to me. I'll email all this to.
I did email
To
it.
the question. Yeah, you email it to me. I'll email it to the rest of the group.
Thank you.
That was a really, really
It was fun. I like this stuff. So that's good.
So I guess we're doing number one now, B1, Karen,
Okay.
I think.
Here's
Yes,
the hand up
yeah,
for
so
that.
there's nothing else here. Thank you, Dana.
Yeah.
By the way,
Yep.
it was also really helpful to look at.
So just as an overview for those who are not here, which is Jamie, okay. The Bay Bluffs project, what we're talking about here is, I'll go back to Dana's map here, but along the entrance of the city from the east, there are a couple, few dozen trees, tall, skinny, large, I should say large pine trees that are in the city's right away along our electric lines, our primary lines that feed the entire town, electricity. These trees, a lot of large branches have broken up in windstorms and even recently, and they threaten the lines there. So what we're doing, and also other infrastructure. So what we're doing is removing these trees or getting a contractor to remove those trees. And then what the tree board is here to do is to decide, and we discussed at length last meeting, but what types of trees we want there and the kind of look and feel we want there. So last meeting, what we were here in November was we picked, I think, 6 or 7 species that we were gonna look at. And I know Teresa was one that was talking about, we want to have some conifers there, so we at least have some greenery. And we talked about the pros and cons of deer resistant versus salt tolerant. And then trees that fruit, so they're not, you know, dropping fruit all over the sidewalk. And as a note there is, we're still not 100% sure where the bike path is gonna end up. Our goal right now, the bike path goes through here along through the parks here and ends up at Hoyt Street, and it might come down Hoyt Street and go this way. Or it might come through the skate park and come down M119 between Bay Bluffs and Hoyt Road. So we're not 100% sure. this route depends on getting an easement from the county. The route that goes between Bay Bluffs and the skate park. So it might not happen. But either way, we might have, we gotta keep in mind that we might have bike traffic. We may have bike traffic going there, but we don't know that for sure.
Should that be sharing the sidewalk with bikes?
Yeah, essentially, we would have to widen that sidewalk probably to make it kind of, just like right here on Zoll Street, it's wide enough for both.
Victor, just as a side, the spillway, is that gonna be made, the steps are gonna be made bike friendly?
Yeah, that's the goal. Yeah,
Okay.
it'll be a ramp, it'll be like a,
Yeah, it's not that much fun to carry my bike up the steps.
no, I know. We did, like I said, we did get the tentative state approval to use the spillway as a bike path, so we're just waiting for them to get the final stamp approval on our final. But anyway, so that's something to keep in mind is that when we're talking about fruiting trees, not dropping like pears or apples or crab apples, whatever on the side, because it could be much more to maintain. So anyway, so Dan had prepared kind of a recap and some questions and obviously there's a recap in the minutes, but of what we should think about with plantings there as
And we
well
have one
as,
correction since then.
yeah, and as well as, as well as the trees that we kind of picked out at last meeting. She got pictures and compiled information about those trees specifically in one by one. So I think that was very helpful. So thanks, Dan.
So one little hitch is in communicating with Lucas about the street tree thing. He's now saying 20 feet.
20 feet.
20 feet high. Now, my argument to that, not argument, but my counterpoint to that would be the wires are actually 15 feet from the sidewalk, so that's a pretty wide planting buffer. So I think if the trees were right underneath the wires, 20 feet would stand. But, and we have talked to Lucas about this, but it seems like if we had a 30 or 35 foot tree, it would be fine because most trees are shaped like this. So by the time it gets up to the wire, here it is, here's the wire. It's rounding down.
I think
that
though,
height.
the distance between the line and where we plant the tree would be critical because it's not just about the tree interfering with the lines, it's about the wind taking, if that tree falls. If that tree is 35 feet and it falls, is it far enough away from the lines that it won't hit the lines when it falls? So that has to be considered.
I guess another consideration is to get the trees we want, would we be willing to have a pruning program where once every 5 years?
We have to
Wouldn't be
do-
topping the leaders off, but we'd just be shaping them.
That's something we'd have to consider.
Yeah.
So I'll recap quickly here with in Dana's email. The first question was, do we want to line them up or go with staggered groupings? It's probably going to be easier. I agree to put them in a straight line, keep them from going under the wires. I agree with that. There might be some more room for staggering. I think maybe when we get to this far, kind of the Hoyt Road intersection right here, it's a little bit different. There's more park area here too, so we might think about that. But I think along Bay Bluffs right here, I think it'd be probably better for straight line. The spacing, I would, 25 feet is fine. I would also leave that up, to Ben and DPW to look at the spacing. We do have rules, I think, generally that we have on the street is generally 25 feet, I think. But
I would say that would be minimum.
yeah, it depends on the size of the tree. Depends on how big the trees are gonna be. So until we know that for sure, but that's something that Ben could work out when we actually get the trees. Do we need or should we take out all the trees to the corner of Hoyt? I'll leave that up to Lucas. I mean, whatever they need, if he feels like they need to take out for the project, they're going to take out. If he feels they threaten the lines.
Could we give him input though, that aesthetically it might look funky to leave the big ones? Like they'll be way out of scale with the new ones that are going in.
I'm sure that's fine. But that's, this project, the goal is to remove them because of the lines, yeah. I mean, each large tree we add adds costs to the project, not a lot, but it'll add a few $1,000. So.
Is it the case though at that corner, the lines are not as much an issue? Is that right?
It's not so much of the lines as much as issue is there's a slope, it goes up higher, like, so there's a little more slope there, so, and it's there's more green space, so there's more trees. Trees can be planted differently. So. Yeah, I don't know if it's just not a problem. I just think it's a little different, slightly different area there, compared to the rest.
Yeah, the other thing we might want to do too is just kind of pause on that corner a little bit until we find out what we're doing about that theater proposal.
Oh, yeah, you guys have that at
At
the Parks Board.
yeah.
Okay.
Amphitheater is interesting, without going into too much detail, a private resident has come forward to fundraise for this. It's a cool amphitheater. Personally, I don't like the idea of it going there, but it's like these kind of curved,
It's natural rock.
natural, putting in berms with like concrete or, stone seating type of thing.
And then there'd be like a little shelter there where people could play music or have art or do some kind of thing there, so. This White Park, well, it's right next to the pickleball courts, right? It's on the corner of White and then
There's not a
one.
lot of room there.
No, it's really, right now, it's a very passive park. People go up there and maybe picnic or maybe sit down, but and watch the fireworks on 4th of July, but other than that, it's quite a passive park, so. So that's still yet to be determined, but you're right, if something happens there, we
Shouldn't
want to
make any
coordinate.
decisions until we know what
Yeah.
we're doing on that, yeah.
I agree with that. Then, will there be irrigation? Right now, our standard has been using gator bags for a lot of new plantings, but I'll leave, again, if Lucas thinks it'll be easier for them guys to just put irrigation in instead of having to fill up the bags, because obviously irrigation is a lot easier, because a lot less work for them than having to fill up the bags, so I'll run that by him. When should the plantings happen? Yeah, after the new trees, if we can remove the trees in the spring, I'm sure they will pull out the stumps, and we would try to get them in the spring, but that depends on when we can get a contractor. So if the contractor can't get the trees out till late spring, we might have to wait till fall, even though it might be an inconvenience if we can't coordinate in time.
Yeah, yes and no. The funny thing is that, when's the best time to plant a tree? When you can get the landscaper. So late spring might be fine, and as long as there's adequate water, I think it would be okay. The problem with waiting till fall is then you're picking through trees that have been on.
Well,
It's
it's another thing we'd have to consider, if we can nail down our trees sooner or later, we can always order them and have them, Ben can house them or someone can house them at his place.
Yes, okay.
And so we can order the trees early. It's just a matter of when the contractor is gonna come there. So ideally spring, yes. So that's good. So then Dana, you had also pulled out the parameters, and I think works well. I think this is something we can share with Lucas and Ben. And I know what you were talking about, the height parameters, and we have obviously this evergreen trees, the Black Hill spruce can grow 30 to 60 feet. That, I don't know if there's other varieties that can grow smaller, no.
No, but then we get into cedars or junipers.
The deciduous, the McNair red horse chestnut, 30 to 40 feet. Hawthorn, 25 to 35. So most of these are in the range of, 25 to 35.
And I wasn't really clear what, after you kind of laid out the trees we had initially selected or thought might work still at the last meeting. The evergreen trees, were those going to be placed in between these?
Well, I think that's where we get into design
Yeah.
considerations, like, do we want to do like a pattern where there's 3 evergreen trees and there's 4 flowering trees and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's
So
why
I can
you
help with that, but yeah,
indicated what this isn't, and then the deciduous trees. The horse chestnut was in addition to these trees, the 4 trees on the first page. Your recommendation, okay, so that's another alternative to us. Is that what you're thinking there?
Deanna's recommended palette actually is on the first page.
Right.
Excuse me, do you have another
So-
hard copy of that?
You can have this. Yeah.
Well, that's okay, I don't need.
That's okay.
I just didn't.
Or Victor, you can find the email.
I don't have it on this computer, so I
Okay.
can forward it to you.
I have it on my computer, so.
So that's okay. So on the first page there, they also has the general parameters. There's 4 trees, what they look like when they're blooming during the year. Then fall color is underneath each one.
I looked at it.
Yeah. And so Part of my thought in these was to provide some variety in colors, so the Crimson Sunset maple is a small maple. It has that beautiful burgundy leaf on it. Cleveland pears are one of the first things to bloom. Ivory silk lilac blooms in the summer after other things are done blooming. The honey locust is super friendly around power lines because it grows in a way where it's easy to trim around the lines. They're all kind of the same scale, so this was one concern I would have, is not having like little crabs, and we got this, and just so it looks like a corridor, with some rhythm and some sequence to it. So kind of similar scale.
So yeah, so if you visualize these trees, the data, and here's the entrance now to the city, right? So, you can see right here, there's power lines and there's, cable. We don't really care so much about cable, but you can see there's the city's primary lines, and they're, like Dana said, probably between 10 and 20 feet distance from these trees. These trees are almost planted in a straight line. But so these evergreens, as you see, they snap, they're gonna fall and, hit these lines. So we're looking at trees that are probably gonna wanna be more along this height right here, as close as possible. But what Dana was suggesting, if we can plant them as far away from the lines, and this might be a better view here, would be ideal.
So the height of the wires, you're saying?
Yeah, so not this wire is cable, telephone, I'm not sure, but these are our primary lines, so this is what we're really concerned about as a city.
Yeah.
So actually, to me, the lower lines look like 20 feet. So I don't know, I just wish there's a way we could go with that 30, because these 4 trees that are on the front here are gonna be more in that. Want to be more like in the 25 to 30 range.
And then, so this is all the trees, along, and we do have some substantial gaps too here, you have some trees that are planted, look at all these trees planted very close together, then you have big gaps, so we create a little more orderly, I guess, aesthetically orderly view. But then let's get to that corner where I was talking about at Hoyt and Main Street here, and you'll see what I was talking about with so now it starts, sloping down the street, so you get a little higher elevation level, right? And I don't know, Dana, this is maybe you and more Ben's wheelhouse, but the advantage of planting a tree up there versus planting it down here, you could actually have little taller trees there if you could plant them lower as opposed to planting them higher. There'd be less interference. And so the lines are still in a straight line, but they're a little further back because of the way the lines are going and the way this is sloping down. So there's, potentially there's more room for some of those larger trees that we have that could go in this right here. These ones are on top of the berm planted.
And another option would be, maybe that's where we do evergreen trees, where there's less concern about height.
But then again, comes to play again, if that park, there's a park there and you
We
evergreen,
don't want to block views.
you want to block views, right?
Right,
So
okay.
that there's all this
Yeah.
different things to consider. But anyway, that was just,
One other thing I suggested too is if you could go back to like kind of the east end of the run there. I think it'd be nice to repeat some of these trees across the street, so you have a sense of
Oh, yeah.
coming down a corridor, not just
agree.
on that north side.
Some of the species already exist across. the street,
Like the honey locust, maybe we don't need to, because we've got maples that are kind of a similar shaped one. But maybe the ones that flower or provide some color would be nice to use across the street.
so I'm not sure, we do have some trees planted across the street right here. That's where they
I
start.
think there's some crab apples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could I go back to your question number 1 that you asked, Dan? Is there any way, and I know that you said because of I understand we had that limited amount of space,
Yeah.
but is there any way you can do both? That stay out of the wires and do some staggering, just so everything's not so
Straight.
symmetrical, straight, more natural?
It would be easier to do it on this side. The one thing, so I'll get back to that, that's a good point. The one thing about this side that we just have to be careful about is kind of blocking the sign.
Yeah.
We use this to advertise a lot of events,
Yeah.
so that's one thing to consider, but so that's where I was kind of getting at, Patrick. Like,
Yeah.
right here, the problem with staggering is our right of way only goes so far, to those lines, right?
Limited.
So there's a lot of grass there, but part of that is the county's Bay Bluffs on that side, that parking lot. So we can't put anything between the sidewalk and the
Sure,
street that's
no.
too narrow. But when we get down this way further,
Might be some.
there's a little more green space, especially when you get down to the park. This is all our property, right? You have a little more green space here. You have a little more green space right here, obviously. So I think there's more room on this west side for some staggering, right? Especially on the berm. You could put one higher, one lower, one higher, one lower. I just don't see the same opportunity. They could be staggered maybe by a few feet,
Right,
but
yeah,
not,
Another thing to consider.
but
this is
not
gonna-
like 5-10 feet.
Right, sure. Even that slight bit, I think, the eye
It's
picks up
more
on that.
aesthetic.
That's
Yeah,
aesthetic, that's what
yeah.
I'm talking about. Yeah, thank you.
So down the road, I can drop a little plan, like where, maybe even if we just staggered them, like a 2-foot stagger, like the second one is back 2 feet, and then the ones that are back 2 feet would be more the narrower growing ones. But like, so we'd have a group of 3 of the Crimson Sunset Maple. Then we have, a group of 3 of this. And then, so you could repeat, not in a straight line across the street, but just like those same groups. Those are details I think we can work on.
As you know, the brain loves variety, right?
It does.
Can you work on that? Yeah, because I think if we can have that by our next meeting, because then we
Yeah.
would know which trees we can order. We should be ordering, because we want to start ordering as soon as possible.
And then, are you gonna talk to Lucas about, is he gonna be okay if we plant these?
I'll talk to Lucas, yeah.
Yeah, they're not
Yeah.
20 feet. But they're close.
So are we?
It's also
good
matter-
for This meeting then? Are we
If
good?
everybody likes these 4, and there's others in here,
Research.
Like it.
but the other ones like either need too much water or, reputation for weak wooded or too tall. So these were the other ones that we discussed and the reasons why
And
not.
I'll also talk to Lucas about, if need be, pruning, like what kind of pruning plan would, and it wouldn't be for a while, because these trees would take a while to grow.
Yeah.
And they might, and they might not even
It
reach their
might not
maximum
ever be
height.
a problem because
A lot of them only, those are ideal conditions at maximum. height.
exactly, like if they were in a big park or something.
These are gonna be next to a sidewalk and salt and all that, so it might not be ideal conditions for
Yeah.
trees to grow that tall. But, and I'm going to assume, and this is just an assumption, I don't wanna promise anything, but I can imagine the next decade or two, these primary lines may eventually go underground. So there's that possibility. I don't know that for sure, though. I mean, that's money, that's a lot of stuff, but that's the way we're going with our electric utilities, is going underground.
That does beg the question though, I don't know, if we have to take them down now, I guess we have to take them down and put something in, but it would be nice to do taller trees there.
Yeah, but I don't know when that's gonna happen. That could be, and it would be an expensive, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, so I don't think we can wait, unless you wanna wait several years with no trees there.
I don't know.
I don't think it's worth it.
I think this would be pretty, people would like it.
Major corridor.
Yeah, so,
And then-
and it's a nice variety.
That's it for the next meeting, then we probably need to move on, because we've got a few minutes
Yeah, a
left
few
for
minutes.
the other, rest of the agenda, but. So, Deanna, are you able to create like a simple plan of what this might look like?
Yeah, and I just wonder at some point if we want to let the public know about it, just so all of a sudden it's not like the playground. Wow, what are you doing? The tree trucks that are cutting
Well,
trees down.
we'll have to go to council, because we're gonna have to spend X amount of money, that's right, so we're gonna wanna make sure it'll go to council for a public meeting, so.
That'll be the chance.
Yeah, that'll be their chance.
Right.
I mean, they can also come here too, but no one.
No one ever comes.
Yeah.
No, not no.
Yeah.
We have an audience.
Really quickly, Karen, if you want to go on, I would
Yeah.
just suggest we table Main streetscape.
Right, you're right.
And we put our tree planning M119 tree replacement, Main Street streetscape, and then even Arbor Day as our 2023 goals for now. And then just, we can hit those 2023 goals, and let's just focus on the tree canopy articles, because we only have a couple of minutes here.
Yeah, well, the tree canopy articles, I did create a spreadsheet update, but I know there's missing ones here. You passed one over to Jackson as well. I don't have enough, for some reason, I only got a couple copies, so there are some missings. I know we did more than this. I did, yeah. And I think we still got, I gotta fill in the blanks. I did a migration from an old computer to a new one, and I don't know if some stuff fell out because I couldn't find it anywhere in the cloud or whatever. So I know there's other articles we did in other months that we did do articles. And Victor, do you keep copies of what we send you in the final article?
I have copies of them. I can,
Yeah. Maybe I can reach out to you and just get those,
Yeah, yeah.
with the subject and the tree featured, or I could reach out to even maybe Charles.
no, I have them. I have them.
Yeah, okay.
Do you have
Yeah.
copies of the actual articles?
No, I have what I've sent to Charles, what Karen has sent.
I have a
Okay.
bunch
But
of.
we have all-
copies.
we
Do you wanna
still-
See some examples?
We have the Harbor Light copies here, so I can make a copy.
You may have them all too, Dana. I don't know if, somehow they got lost in the transfer, but I couldn't locate them. So this gives you some idea of some of the articles we've written. So I think for right now, the question is, do we want to write an article for January? And what would that be?
Mhm.
Would it be the map we just talked about, like showing people where the city, has, covers that property and the other property is privately owned on the corridors? Or is there some other article that we would prefer to do for January?
I feel like we kind of addressed the city property thing in other articles.
But we haven't really defined on the map, where those, private versus public is very clearly, I don't think.
I don't think though, to reproduce a map at the scale that it would have to be at for a newspaper that you're.
Yeah, we'd have to get a large,
Yeah,
like the whole page for that, half the page, I would say, for.
could we at least list streets or whatever, just so people understand? Like between these streets and this streets, this is private, and between these streets and this streets, is city property. Maybe the most sensitive issue is the bluff. Maybe that's the only thing we need to talk about right
I'd be cautious only because to guarantee what is city right away and what is private, we'd actually have to have an actual survey. Our general thumb rule is 60 feet wide, 30 feet from the center. But this is an old town, a lot of old flats and a lot of the streets actually, like Spring Street is a very good one, and very good example of it. Right here. I think I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so you guys can see what I'm talking about, but it kind of juts out this way, the street, the road. But so if you took 30 feet from the center of the road, you would say, all right, that's how much you own, but actually it's as if our right of way goes, it shifts more than that. So some people's front yard are essentially 3/4 just the right of way, when in other parts of the town, it's only
now.
like maybe 10 feet is the right of way. So it's not a for sure evenly applied throughout the entire town. So I wouldn't want to confuse anyone and be like, well, you said 30 feet from the center was.
But you know they will hold you.
So I would just be cautious of that.
Okay, good point.
It's but as a general rule of thumb, yes, we say 30 feet from the center is generally, but see a survey or get a survey for an actual description.
Okay,
Good night.
so
I had two ideas. Go ahead.
I was just gonna throw my idea in the ring too. I think definitely stay away from the political. Would a general article, something celebrating trees be a possibility? I'll throw that in the ring and kind of be helpful.
I had one similar to that, like trees for winter interest.
Yeah, upbeat.
either one, we did talk a little bit about heritage trees in one of the articles, but that's not everything about celebrating trees.
Right.
Yeah,
A little bit more informative.
well, I kind of like the idea of the trees for winterscapes.
Yeah.
One, want me to do it? I do know what the trees for winter.
Yeah. I have to work with you on it. You are the expert.
I'm thinking about whether we could feature one of the trees that'll go on 119. Or maybe I'll just. Can I just pick something? Or do we have to decide right now?
No.
Okay.
Very thankful to have a landscape architect.
Oh, boy.
Advisory board.
Oh, boy.
One of these times.
Oh, boy.
Right? Selling stuff all day long, but I can't talk about these that much. Well, that covers January. So why don't everybody give some thought to articles beyond that? I don't think we're gonna attempt to do every month anymore. We had tried to do that in the beginning, but we're looking at maybe every other month. And it sounds like we probably need to continue meeting monthly, for what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
Got a lot of things to decide.
Can I ask a question? Have you already made that, was that decision already made last month about the articles?
About doing articles
Yeah,
every
I
month. or
mean,
every other
we've talked
month?
about,
Yeah.
we suggested moving toward every other month if possible.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was just curious, what was that decision based on?
Well, I think there's a time factor to it of getting it done. But also, how many more topics do we have, you know? And if we had a list of topics we'd like to do, that would be a great place to start, because then we could decide how many, you know, if we want to do one a month or one every other month.
Well, it's been basically you two doing it, so
I think
I'm
it
just
could
asking the
be
question.
reader burnout too, you know, maybe it's not so special if, here it is again, I'm not gonna read it, you know, maybe if it was every other month.
But we really don't have anything to back that up.
No, we don't, that's
Yeah.
just my feeling though.
Yeah.
I think there was though that the conversation focused more on topics, and it's volunteers about your guys' time, you know, if you don't have the time to do it that month, that's really.
I get it.
Yeah.
We had a half page last month, I think,
Yeah,
that got a little long.
yeah.
But
You
it was
guys,
good.
you guys have been the one doing it. I've really enjoyed them. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, Dan does most of the work on the technical details for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I
I
just
think
wanted
we
to ask
should
the
all,
questions, that's
I
all.
mean, as many of us being lay people here, you know, unlike Dana,
Yeah.
you know, just all of us, whatever interesting things we think, you know, we would like to know about, and maybe our community would like to know about. So
Yeah.
I think if we all could come together with some good ideas for next meeting, and then we could kind of see what that looks like, and then does that necessitate every month or every other month or whatever.
And I mentioned last month that I'd be happy to help out with writing some of these articles. And it'll be easier for me to think more about that, having this, and also if I can get some copies of some of the older stuff.
yeah, yeah.
It'd be interesting to know, I don't know if how you would do it, but how many people are enjoying it? I don't know how you find that out, but I do.
With some secret message in
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right, well, I think we've gone beyond our
Yeah.
hour here.
Sorry.
So
there.
any other comments or questions? And thank you for attending. What is your name?
My name, I'm Gail Brown.
Gail Brown. Oh, Gail, okay.
So
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm
before.
out of line saying this, but Gail submitted an application to be on tree board.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, in case we
Very
have a vacancy.
Great. Well, thank you.
Very interesting.
And then, how about you?
Yeah.
sir?
I'm Tony Johnson, Tracy's husband.
Oh, okay.
All right. It's hard to get in and out of the car with the scooter.
Victor, for next month. Do we want to put this out to the community? Let's discuss it.
We can discuss it next month, yeah.
And then should we update it on the website if it is on the website?
Yeah, we can talk about that. now.
It is on the website. But I think this has been updated since then. Yes.